Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from Pro Football Network. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, it's the bye week. Do you feel properly rested and ready for the rest of the season?
No, I am in a hell of my own making, and it is no one's fault but my own. And I'm getting great exercise, but I'm certainly not well rested.
So about that running trope you seem to have on the on the football party about undisclosed locations.
Indeed, yes.
Are you committing crimes right now with like Luke Braun's like face as a mask? Is that what's going on?
Were I to do that, I would not disclose it on a podcast, A, that I know Luke Braun listens to, B, at least 3 other people, minimum, listen to, and C, could later be used to document evidence of any alleged crimes. Certainly I would not do that in that sort of hypothetical world that you're proposing, but you have good ideas, James.
Good. I'm glad that that's said once every 3 years. That does sustain me and keep me on the show. That is something that I need to hear every once in a while. So, is that a bit like when Stringer Bell was yelling at the guy in The Wire about, "Are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy?"
It is exactly like that.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We are on the bye week. We don't have a game to break down, but we're going to do some national stuff here and talk about a couple of things. Plus, we got a big announcement here in just a moment. But before we start, thank you guys for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to financially support the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. The preferred way is over at patreon.com/Norse Code. And check us out there for $3.50 a month or for $37.81 a year, which is compared to the $42 for 12 months. You can support us over there. You can get access to the Discord, bonus episodes, all that. Bonus episode just about to come out, and stuff like that. So check us out. We actually, the mailbag for this episode was compiled just from a couple of questions that I asked the Discord people. So they got their own mailbag this time. So you want to be cool like them? Check them out over at patreon.com/Norse Code. There's also another benefit to signing up for Patreon. We'll talk about that in a bit. You can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code as well. That's another way to make a one-time donation to the show. You can also go to norsecode.threadless.com as well. Before we begin, it's important to note that it's getting close to Thanksgiving, and that means a couple of different things for us personally. It means Arif is ready to rage about his hatred of turkeys. It's boiling.
Honestly, I did not know that there was another thing. I thought it was actually just that first thing.
Yep, and this year it's going to mean 2 things. It's going to mean that rage is beginning to boil, and the second thing is that on November 17th, in the greater Minneapolis area, we will be doing a live show. Yes, we will be doing a Norse Code live show. So we're likely going to be doing this in Eagan. I'm just waiting to hear back from 1 or 2 different places on the location. But as an announcement, we will be doing a live show in the Minneapolis area. We've never done a Minneapolis live show during the regular season. So we're planning on doing this November 17th, likely about 7:30, 8 o'clock. It is a Thursday night. It is also important because I will be delivering the jersey that particular evening. So if you've ever wanted to see a signed and framed Laquan Treadwell jersey, now is your time. This will be delivered to our winner.
I cannot imagine a more compelling thing to bring you out to a brewery to hang out with 2 podcast dudes than that signed Laquan Treadwell jersey.
We had a ton of fun last time, and while it's not the James Madison NDSU wine bottle that Arif still has no memory of, it is still a fantastic item that you should definitely get your picture in front of.
Sorry, what wine bottle?
Exactly. So, check us out November 17th. I'll have the location next episode. which will be airing on Thursday night, Friday morning. So check it out. November 17th, Minneapolis live show. Be there. We're going to be giving away a ticket to the Monday night game against the Cowboys, which will be happening a couple days after that show. So if you would like another reason to show up, if the Laquan Treadwell jersey is not enough of a draw, check us out. We're giving away a ticket to the Monday night game as well. So check us out, November 17th. Let's get into the actual news. And unfortunately, we do have a little bit to discuss as far as off the field stuff. Oli Udoh was involved in something over the break. It doesn't look particularly good. And he is still an active person on the roster as of this recording.
Yeah, so there was some initial reporting out of Miami from a local Miami reporter that Oli Udoh allegedly was in a nightclub and had followed a woman into the bathroom and then would not leave. Right, that was the allegation, and he was charged with disorderly conduct and resisting an officer. And in Florida, there's specifically a charge called resisting an officer without violence. So there's an escalated charge with violence that he did not get charged with. Ben Goessling got some more details, and according to him, the arrest affidavit filed by Miami-Dade County Police, a security guard working at Club E11. I think it's just pronounced 11, but there's like the L in 11 is also 2 1s. So 11 in downtown Miami observed Udoh talking to a woman in line for the bathroom and attempting to enter the female bathroom as the line moved forward. The security guard warned Udoh to leave the bathroom, but Udoh refused, according to the affidavit. The security guard called additional staff to assist her moving Udoh from the club. 2 Miami police officers, one working in an off-duty capacity, intervened and identified themselves as police. Udoh, according to the affidavit, continued to resist the officers' commands before they escorted him to a marked patrol car. Again, these are all allegations. We don't know what the full story is, and so we're going to be kind of in a wait-and-see mode. The Vikings are also in a wait-and-see mode. They released a statement saying, we're gathering additional information. We're aware of last night's arrest. So that's kind of where we are. It brings into focus the question about the Vikings' offensive line depth. And so we'll kind of shelve the off-field implications for now until, Udoh or his team have the ability to kind of respond. Certainly it doesn't look very good. But the on-field kind of implications of this are fairly minimal for the Vikings. I mean, they are a very healthy team. We would like to believe that because of the association that the athletic training staff has with the Rams athletic training staff. I mean, they were plucked from the Rams athletic training staff, who generally are a very healthy team compared to the rest of the NFL. We'd like to believe that that'll continue. I think that's pretty good belief, but you never know, right? Any percent chance is a chance you have to think about, that the Vikings could be injured. The relatively good news about this is that Blake Brandel seems to be a much higher priority backup, and so we're a tackle to go down. Brandel would be the one that goes in. We're a guard to go down, and Chris Reed would be the one to go in, right? And so from that perspective, Oli Udoh is not critical depth for the Vikings. Of course, roster space is scarce, so all depth players are important in that perspective. But the Vikings made the unusual move of rostering Verdarian Lowe, and Verdarian Lowe is a tackle. And so with 3 tackles on the roster, kind of potentially losing one of them means that or 3 backup tackles, potentially losing one of them has a much smaller impact. So you may not have to worry too much. And in a world where they didn't have Verdarian Lowe, you could even say, hey, they might kick Ezra Cleveland out and promote Chris Reed to guard, right? I mean, that is always a possibility. So those are things to kind of consider. As far as bye week arrests go, this one has a fairly minimal impact on the club. Of course, the impact on any alleged victims are separate and pretty big, right? And so you don't want to minimize that. But in terms of how it affects the team, it seems like this is probably not going to be a particularly huge deal. And because of that, I would not be shocked that if additional details emerge or Udoh doesn't have the ability to build a good case for himself, the team lets him go. I mean, they've done the same thing before things have gone to trial, as arrest reports come in and they have graphic details or It doesn't seem like there's a lot of evidence to exonerate. They might, cut him before the legal process plays out. That happens sometimes.
Yeah. So that is what we know on the subject. Unfortunately, there's not much more we can really glean from any of this because this was something that happened over the weekend. This is still pretty new, and the legal process will move slow as molasses. So if there is something worth updating, we will be happy to update. But until that point, that's pretty much what we've got for you on that. So otherwise, a fairly quiet week as far as Viking stuff is concerned. Things were, I'd say, relatively normal. This was a good bye week for the Vikings outside of that. So, and it's not like the Vikings really had to do anything as far as get people better from injury this particular week. This, again, as you had mentioned, this is a team that's doing well health-wise.
Yeah. The starters that they intended to begin the season with, I believe, unless I'm massively missing something, they're all healthy. And obviously you don't want to say, hey, it was easy to absorb the loss of Lewis Cine or something like that. But the fact that they were pretty comfortable with Cameron Bynum starting means that they're, from a starter perspective, there aren't any particularly serious issues, right? I mean, you've got Dalvin Cook and CJ Ham and Kirk Cousins and all three receivers, all five offensive linemen. Seems like all the defensive linemen, linebackers, etc., are healthy. Like, the only concerns that you have, obviously, are Lewis Cine, who hopefully will be back within a year. I don't know if that's going to be something they'll be able to heal within a year. My research indicates that maybe he will be. Andrew Booth has been on and off in terms of injury, but again, not a starter. Harrison Smith had that concussion, and he should be back. So, it's probably fine. So, no issues with the 22 or 23 or 24, or however you want to classify the number of starters given all the sub packages. But yeah, I mean, the Vikings, I haven't done a look into every team, but the Vikings to me seem like they are the healthiest team in the league right now.
It's a very weird prospect.
Yeah, it's odd.
Yeah,
don't know what to do with that.
It is something that's kind of hard to wrap your head around. Well, actually, the whole league is kind of in a weird spot, especially offensively. Like, offensively, this league seems very different than in past years.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I talked a little bit about it on the Minnesota Football Party. I cannot buy the explanation that everyone is giving, right? Which is that, we've seen an increase in the amount of cover 2 or cover 4 or cover 3 or any too high safety looks in the NFL. Obviously, this is a response, or rather an adaptation of the Vic Fangio, Brandon Staley principles that were so effective a year or two ago. The one that got Brandon Staley a job with the Chargers and why Ed Donatell is with the Vikings. But that seems like a pretty poor explanation. Now, I looked at how teams were doing against, say, cover 3, cover 1, and cover 0, and they're doing close to the same, a little bit worse. And so there is something to suggest that the cover 2 thing might provide us with some of those answers, but it still doesn't account for everything. And so I've been trying to look around, see what these kind of issues might be. And I stumbled on an interview that Matt Harmon, who's been on this podcast before, he's great. He does Reception Perception. He's BYB, or he's Matt Harmon _ BYB. He had on his podcast, he interviewed Austin Eckler, and he was like, "Hey, man, offenses are getting kind of weird. We're not seeing as much, even Justin Herbert, right? Austin Eckler's quarterback, even Justin Herbert is not ripping it off right away." And so, a lot of people are talking about how this is a rise in cover 2, forcing people to dink and dunk. And Austin Eckler, I thought, gave a pretty great answer. He said, "Hey, one of the things that Brandon Staley told us is that defensively, because he's a defensive head coach, is that it takes a lot of 3 and 5 yard gains to gain 40 yards. And so our goal is to prevent those 40 yards because you can make mistakes between those 3 and 5 yard gains." So that's part of it. But also he was talking about how many 5-man surfaces we see. So fronts, basically, and how the league has become so aggressive about moving to zone running, right? Where so many teams do zone running, and 5-man surfaces are particularly good at fighting zone running, at stopping it, because you prevent creases from opening up, and it's very difficult for running backs to be able to find the cut that they need to find in zone running. And the response to that is typically to engage in power running, move your gaps around, right? So hey, they've got a man advantage in every gap that you're going to use, so let's move some people and create a man advantage somewhere else at the risk of creating a man disadvantage and just trust your running back to outrun the backside defender. Okay, fine. But teams are not really used to that. Offensive linemen that are being drafted in the NFL don't really have that. So that's part of it. I mentioned on the football party that I also think, where we have this lost generation of quarterbacks, basically, where, and Luke was doing some pretty live research Luke Braun was doing live research when I brought this up. When he was like, yeah, looking at the quarterbacks between 2012 and 2017, you've got Russell Wilson on one end. You've got a little bit like Jared Goff and Carson Wentz in the middle, but obviously they didn't turn out, and their inability to play at a high level now, right, is a reason that we're not seeing high level production. And then you hit like 2018, where you've got your Josh Allen's the 2017-2018 area, where you've got like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and so that class came in, but there's this whole middle generation of quarterbacks where we're not seeing long-term success because players like Ben Roethlisberger and Matt Ryan and Phillip Rivers, as well as, of course, players like Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, and Drew Brees at the even like upper level, created a bunch of teams where that you had really good quarterbacks. And so all you really had was like Russell Wilson, especially after Andrew Luck retired. All you had was Russell Wilson kind of moving this middle group of quarterbacks, this middle generation of quarterbacks forward, where you just, ever since, basically the Stafford draft, we just haven't seen, a bunch of, and so that might be part of it, is that now that Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are not doing very well, we don't have this middle group of quarterbacks that can be franchise players. But I think that that's also kind of only a partial explanation, because then it forces you to ask the question, well, some of those classes turned out to be what we thought were good quarterbacks, and those quarterbacks aren't good anymore, right? And take like Derek Carr, for example, did pretty well last year. What happened there? And I'll talk about the Raiders in a second. Hey, both Jared Goff and Carson Wentz fell off really hard after having really great seasons in 2017 and 2018. What happened, right? There are additional questions to be asking, including some of the players that might make that time look good are struggling now, perhaps uncharacteristically, like in the case of Derek Carr. So that is like one explanation, but it demands so many other additional explanations. It feels incomplete, but I think that that's got to be part of it, because it would explain. So the 5-man surface thing helps explain why we're not seeing as much rushing explosion. Like I saw that Stephen Ruiz published an article that some of the top, and this was a couple of weeks ago before the Lions got blanked by the Patriots, but some of the top offenses in the NFL are run forward offenses, like the Browns and the Lions. And that's a response to the cover 2 stuff. But if you take a look, and I think it was a great piece, but the reason I didn't come to that conclusion when I wrote about it was because overall aggregate performance in the running game across the league was about the same. So passing performance decreased, running performance stayed about the same. And I think what Eckler's point was was that when you go to that too high look, you would be able to balance it out with running, and now you can't balance it out with running. So that, I think, is part of it, right? And we're seeing Derrick Henry, especially at the beginning of the year, is not playing as well as he normally does. Aaron Jones is not playing as well as he normally does. Jonathan Taylor is having a lot of trouble, and all of them have individual explanations for why that may be the case, right? Like, I'm not going to blame Jonathan Taylor for like the makeshift offensive line that the Colts have, but for every kind of DeAndre Swift, we've got a Jonathan Taylor where we're expecting a really high-level running game and we're not getting it, or even a Dalvin Cook is a good example too. So yeah, it is a very weird year, and it's contributing to the sense that we don't have a lot of separation between teams.
Well, you just say that, and all I can think of is just the absolute glut of teams that are sitting at, that were sitting at 3-3.
Yeah. And obviously the division, the Packers has some of that. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to kind of, because you've got these teams at the top, right? You've got a 6-0 Philadelphia, 6-1 Giants, you've got a 5-1 Vikings, but you've got, a 3-4 Chicago Bears, you've got a 3-4 Green Bay Packers, you've got a 4-3 Baltimore, a 4-3 Cincinnati, 4-3 Miami, 3-4 New England, right? Tampa Bay, Atlanta, 3-4, Indianapolis, 3-1. The Chargers 4-3, the entire NFC West, period, right? Because it's 4-3, 3-3, 3-4, 3-4. Like the entire NFC West is just that. And so which I mean, the top side of that is that there's not many teams with only 1 or 2 wins, right? But like that kind of sucks too, because like you don't have a sense of and this reminds me of like the take that I had a bit ago, that people don't actually like parity because it feels like these games are meaningless if you could just replicate them all with coin flips, right? And people didn't like that. And I think we're seeing it, right? Some of it's, we're seeing bad football play out, so the process is kind of ugly. So that's one thing that we don't like. But also, like, it's so tough to get a good sense of who everybody is, and that's very frustrating. The good thing is, though, we might secretly have a couple of good teams, right? So we have some teams that are great, right? We've got Philadelphia and Buffalo and Kansas City, right? We've got some teams that feel like they might be good, right? Like the Giants and the Vikings and maybe the Cowboys, right? And if I don't know, Tua's performance yesterday was like was not inspiring, but he did win, and the beginning of the season for Tagovailoa was really fantastic. So maybe Miami, but I think like one thing that's always exciting is that there's kind of this upper middle class of teams that's competing for a wild card spot, and it didn't feel like we had that upper middle class except for teams like the Vikings and the Giants. We were just kind of waiting for the bottom to fall out for them, but not teams that were like, yeah, man, that's a 5-1, 4-3 team. That's good, right? They're not great. They're not elite. I wouldn't take them, even at home against the top teams in the league, but they should beat most teams, right? They should be in the playoffs. They may have the ability to win 1 or 2. Maybe they get lucky to get to the Super Bowl, right? And I don't think we have those teams, but I think some of those teams are beginning to emerge. I think the best example of that right now is the Cincinnati Bengals. We saw some really great stuff from Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase over the past 3 weeks that I think, like Joe Burrow is the most sacked quarterback in the league. Like, I'm not going to make any excuses. Like, that offensive line is bad, but I think they're figuring out how to create an offense without that offensive line, and that's helping in a really big way. So that's part of it, right? So that's really cool, and they've I think they've gone 2-1 since that really bad start that they've had. So that's going to be part of it. The Raiders, I think, are really interesting. So they started 0-3, and a lot of people, me included, started talking like, hey, man, are we going to get a first-year fire out of Josh McDaniels or Nathaniel Hackett, right? And that 0-3 start was pretty bad. They had one good game with Devontae Adams, and then they couldn't get the ball to him, which sounds kind of familiar with the Justin Jefferson stuff, except the Vikings were winning 2 out of those 3 games. But it feels like the Raiders have figured it out. They know how to pepper the ball around. Derek Carr's been more aggressive. He's been able to get the ball to Devontae Adams and, Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow and just kind of the usual suspects. I mean, the defense needs to get better, right? I mean, it's basically the Max Crosby show. We're seeing some good stuff from Daron Harmon. But, like, there's otherwise it's kind of – but, like, there's something with the Raiders where, they went 2-1 after that start, and the one loss was against the Chiefs, and it was by 1 point. Right. So, hey, that sounds like an upper middle class team that can kind of make things a little bit exciting, even though it sounds weird after that start. The Titans are like the least descriptive team in the NFL to me. I'm sure like Draw Play Dave would agree. But like, it's hard to get a sense of them because, that Raiders game was really weird. It felt like they had gone way ahead and they almost let the Raiders get back in. And it almost felt like a collapse. Obviously, against the Bills, they got, boat raced, right? They barely beat, the Washington Commanders. They do a decent but not great job against the Colts. And then once again, when they play the Colts after the bye week, they do a pretty good job. Just a 9-point win, but a pretty good job. And it feels like, first of all, we've seen Malik Willis play a lot more than we expected. But like Ryan Tannehill is not who he was, but it felt like the worst of Ryan Tannehill this season is like over. It feels like we're not going to see that again. So we're not going to see that moment, for example, where he got benched for Malik Willis. And hopefully, he's going to be healthy enough to continue because Malik Willis did have to play at the end of the game against the Colts, and he did not look particularly great. But the Titans feel like a team that are pretty close to getting it back together. We're going to see some pretty good Derrick Henry games. I don't know. The Jets, I think they're fake. They're 5-2. They started out like 1-2. They destroyed the Packers, which was fun to see. But Zach Wilson is just not a very good quarterback, so I think the bottom's going to fall out. Obviously, the Breece Hall injury was really huge. They just traded for James Robinson. Fantastic. It only cost them. It's probably going to cost them a 5th round pick. It was reported as a 6th round pick, but it is actually a conditional fifth round pick. It becomes a fifth rounder if James Robinson gets 600 or more yards, which barring injury, he almost certainly will. But great. They've got a good running game. They've got some good defenders. We're seeing a lot out of Sauce Gardner, which is really fun to see. We're seeing a lot out of Quinnen Williams. But I mean, Zach Wilson's bad, so I actually don't think the Jets are in that category, but it was something I was thinking about. When I wrote down all these teams, I was like, are there any NFC teams in this? Like, that's all AFC teams. Are there any NFC teams that can make the wild card interesting aside from the Giants and the Vikings, who will have a weird kind of vibe to them by the time they hit the playoffs, right? If the Packers and Bucks revive, I don't think they will. We've got an update specifically with the quarterbacks of those two teams coming up. Maybe Washington and Carolina with maybe they'll continue with PJ Walker and Taylor Heineke, spring league superstars, by the way. Just want to
throw out, ridiculousness is this world. Just I remember being inebriated in Vegas with you and specifically putting money down for the under for Washington Commanders wins because it was funny, and B, right, because it was fun to just literally put money against Carson Wentz. And the idea of them winning is just not something I'm happy about. And I watched a Bears team win tonight too. That was the other team that I put money. I was like, this isn't fun at all.
Yeah. So from a money perspective, obviously it sucks because we want Washington to lose, but from a takes perspective, this is fantastic. I'm
glad this is actually just leaning into the meme.
Yeah, Carson Wentz being so bad that a USFL quarterback's taking his job. All right.
That's just where we're at. But this is, this is the year of the backup quarterback. We've joked about how, this is how the Vikings just are only going to play backup quarterbacks this year. But this is happening to a number of teams. Yeah, no, absolutely. I wrote this twice in my column to Pro Football Network, once in week 5 and another in week 7, because I felt like we needed to revisit that story because teams are better off with their backup quarterbacks. I don't think that the Patriots should long term go with Bailey Zappi over Mac Jones. I don't think that the Cowboys should go with Cooper Rush over Dak Prescott or anything like that. I think that both of those players are long-term better for the franchise and probably short-term, but it might take a second. But PJ Walker, I feel like he probably just is better than Baker Mayfield, period. Taylor Heineke, better than Carson Wentz. We might see Sam Ehlinger, right? That he's replacing an injured Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan is, I guess, benched for the year. I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation where it's they announced that Matt Ryan is benched for the year. He has a shoulder injury, a grade 2 injury. And it's if it sounded like, and I didn't look into this too deeply, but it sounded like he might get healthy again, but it's Sam Ehlinger's job to lose basically. So I don't know. Was it Rappaport? Apologies if it was not Rappaport, but this was broken this morning on Twitter. And the report was that Matt Ryan is benched. He is also hurt, but regardless of his shoulder injury, he is benched. That's the way they put it. That's not
wild.
Yeah, that's acknowledging your quarterback is cooked.
Yeah, it really is. It is. And before Joe Burrow was the most sacked quarterback, actually it was Matt Ryan until the Jaguars somehow couldn't sack him. He came off a game with 6 sacks. The week before was 5. The Jaguars put up an egg, right, in terms of total sacks. So then Matt Ryan fell to second in terms of most sacked. But if you count sacks and knockdowns, Matt Ryan is number 1 with a bullet, not close. So we'll see how Sam Ehlinger deals with that reality. But even like Brett Rippon, awful game from him, right? But the first 2 minutes and the last 2 minutes were a lot better than anything we've seen from Russell Wilson this year. And so it just makes you think, right? I don't know, maybe. So yeah, we're seeing a lot from backup quarterbacks, and a lot of these backup quarterbacks, I didn't even mention Andy Dalton, right? Andy Dalton with the Saints, seemingly a better player than Jameis Winston. Hey, let's let that ruminate. Let's think about that. That's all.
That's all you're saying here is just let's just enjoy what we have together, and maybe the Vikings will end up playing a backup quarterback in Buffalo.
Entirely possible. Matthew Collar thought that maybe Buffalo's train is a little bit too strong. The steam's going on, so like you can't derail Buffalo. But I don't know, man. It's tough to mess with Magic.
Well, let's mess with Magic for a moment and talk about Tom Brady and the Bucs and Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And if we can just throw red meat to our rabid listeners here, is there anything more fun to watch right now than Aaron Rodgers lying on his face, almost refusing to get up at the end of a game after he knows that it's over and they have another loss?
My favorite caption of that picture was just, he has a hot dog in there.
Yep. He saw what happened to Sanchez. He doesn't want to get crap for eating on the sidelines or, on the field.
Yeah, so you just got to hide that face down in the dirt.
And it's, I wanted to bring Justice on this week just to have a welfare check on him. Just be like, dude, how you doing? Because, well, first off, is he coming back? Second, because it's worth asking. The man doesn't appear to want to be anywhere near this offense. I don't know what calls are being put into Rodgers' helmet, but it doesn't look like they're the ones that he's putting out. Like he is he just audibling out of everything that comes his way? He doesn't have the receivers for it. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, it's tough. So we saw. I don't know if we mentioned this on this podcast, but Rodgers had said he would like to have tempo, which means getting rid of motion in the offense. But we know that even though tempo is very useful in being able to control the pace at which you run the offense, motion specifically has at least an effect that we can measure by statistics that improves the offense. But Rodgers doesn't like motion, right? In the same way that when Ben Roethlisberger was playing, he would just not do play action very often. Statistically, we know that play action improves a quarterback's passing, but for a specific quarterback, somebody like Ben Roethlisberger, it probably hurts or it makes him uncomfortable for the rest of the game or something. You have to work with the parameters of the quarterback that you're with. So knowing that 90% of quarterbacks do better under play action doesn't tell you about Ben Roethlisberger, right? Same thing with Aaron Rodgers, apparently. I don't know, but he doesn't really like what motion is doing, and that is the nature of these offenses, right? When you hire a Matt LaFleur because he comes from the McVay tree, or say a Kevin O'Connell or a Zach Taylor or whatever, right? When you hire one of those guys, part of the package is motion, right? They use motion to create mismatches, to help quarterbacks identify defenses, to induce false starts sometimes, and to create difficult running angles to attack. There's a bunch of different reasons to do it. And Rodgers hates it. He wants to, quote, simplify the offense. Matt LaFleur is I don't know what that means. Fantastic to see the spat going public. They're like family. And that historically works out well for Rodgers.
Yeah. So exactly.
So that is really fantastic. But we know the real story, right? The real story is that Blue Earth denied her witchdom.
It's important to note at this point that if you are unfamiliar with the whole cursing of cursing of the moon, hexing of the moon, the baby witches, whatever, we're just going to lean in on this trope and call it good. But if you are unfamiliar, the Christmas show from 2020 is where you want to start to learn Arif's love of the baby witches, or at least Arif's knowledge of the baby witches.
Okay, thank you. It gives me no pleasure to report on the baby witch phenomena. I am anti-knowing about these things, but I am an investigative journalist at heart, and I report on kind of the most important issues of the day, knowing that everybody's vibes were off because of baby witches hexing the moon, knowing that Aaron Rodgers, made some kind of magical errors moving on from Shailene Woodley, especially in the messy way that he did, over to Blue of Earth without establishing witchy protection. That I think, and Rodgers knows it too. He was wearing a protective pendant in his most recent press conference. So, this is something that it's becoming.
Was that
important.
The one where he looked like he was wearing a bathrobe?
Yeah, same one. The one where he looked like a hippie Sith Lord.
That's the one. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, same one. He was wearing when he entered the stadium, the pendant was wrapped in a sort of a red cloth, and when he left the stadium, it had been unwrapped and revealed a skull. Which, look, man, we've been joking a lot about like witch stuff, but that the fact that is true, I'm not joking. That all happened, makes this so much more interesting, right? Like,
this is the dumbest timeline.
Yeah, does Aaron Rodgers believe all the witch stuff? Oh my God, let's go. So he clearly is attempting to make up for the lack of magical arts in his life by bringing in artifacts and resources and magics to him, with him, to kind of supplement the fact that he can't rely on having a support system around him. As well versed in the magics that he needs it to be. So that's an issue. So we've seen a little bit of mainstream reporting on that, but we've seen even more mainstream reporting on the witch connection to Tom Brady, who also is struggling. So James Dator over at SB Nation published a piece called TikTok Witches, or it's about TikTok witches and Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen. So the rumor that Gisele Bündchen is a white witch specifically has been around for some time, and on Witch Talk has been around since at least 2019, according to my research. A sentence that I said. I'm just thinking about my life right now.
Just keep thinking about the crimes you're going to pull off with a mask with Luke Braun's face on it.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, power through. Great. So Gisele Bündchen is a known white witch. This has not been discussed a ton. I mean, it's kind of gauche to discuss it, if we're being honest. We know that the earth loves Gisele Bündchen. On her birthday, she planted 40,000 trees. So, of course, there is a deep relationship that Bündchen has with the earth. Also, I'm learning that maybe we're supposed to pronounce her name Gisele. That seems wrong to me, but that is a theory that's also been posited on Witch Talk. Don't know how important that is. Names are very important in witchcraft, but that one just seems kind of like a nitpicky thing. We'll see. So because Tom Brady retired to be with his wife, and then after 40 days, and that number is significant for, I'm going to say obvious reasons, but let's pretend they're obvious reasons. Unretired against the wishes of his wife. And so I'm going to link a couple of the TikToks that talk about this. Two of them are from Witch Talk. One of them is from Christian Talk, very upset about Tom Brady, who they viewed as a good Christian man who has a bunch of Christian friends, like Mark Wahlberg, who they refer to as an open Catholic. So very brave of Wahlberg to do that. But Tom Brady's kind of, decline into witchdom is something that they seem to be pretty concerned about. So I'm gonna link that TikTok as well. But they all seem to agree, right, that Gisele Bündchen is a witch and that Tom Brady has openly admitted. Now they didn't cite their sources, but apparently Tom Brady has openly admitted that he uses witchcraft to help him win games, or to quote one of the TikToks, "do good at football," which I haven't seen, but let's take it. I mean, these people care a lot about witchcraft. They would do the research. So we're going to take it on faith that Tom Brady did say out loud at one point that he uses witchcraft, and that Gisele Bündchen has also said multiple times that she is a witch and uses witchcraft. These, again, they didn't cite their sources, but why wouldn't we trust people this invested in witchcraft about witchcraft? I mean, they're the subject matter experts.
At this point, I'd just like to remind our listeners, you are listening to the bye-week episode. This is what you're getting. You're getting up-to-the-minute news about the Witch Talk crisis.
Yeah, so, it's a problem. It's contributing to the lack of offense in the NFL. So, it seems like Tom Brady has kind of lost the access to magic that he has, which is why in press conferences he looks gaunt and drained because he doesn't have as much life force, obviously, as he did before, even last year. So, keep that in mind. Yeah, we should talk about the left guard problem with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We should talk about the problem they have with Robert Hansley at center. Sure, we should talk about the revolving door they've had at receiver, a bunch of injuries, like Julio Jones didn't come online, Chris Godwin missed a few games, Mike Evans missed because of suspension. Yeah, all of that matters, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that Tom Brady ticked off a witch.
If I can change gears for a moment.
Why would you do that?
Can we talk about how the Falcons appear to actually know what's going on in their organization? They managed to trade, rather. I'd say get rid of. They managed to trade a legend for their team in Matt Ryan for picks, and he's completely washed. He was going to be on the books for him. He's out. They got rid of Julio Jones at just the right time. Other than trying to get in on Deshaun Watson, they actually know they seem to have a decent idea what the hell they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and from a football perspective, probably it was smart to be in on the Watson stuff. So, in terms of being a efficiently run organization, it seems to be there. That doesn't make them a good organization, right? Because the Deshaun Watson stuff is reprehensible. But there you go. And they also were able to trade away Deion Jones for picks, which I didn't think was possible because Jones had fallen off. And so, and they could continue to be in the trade market. That's something to kind of consider. But the Falcons do seem to have, and that offense is really well designed. Like, it is wild to me to see an offense that has, players as good as like Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and hopefully, next year we'll get Calvin Ridley back after, he cashes in on his Washington Commanders under. That offense has really good skilled players. That offensive line has players that are playing better than ever, right? Like Caleb McGarry, people thought was a wasted pick. Now he's playing really well. That entire offensive line is playing really well. Cordero Patterson is playing well. When he's out or injured or whatever, Tyler Algier is playing really well. And then they're led by Marcus Mariota, which feels like such a disappointment, right? But they're scoring points sometimes they're not. But like once they get a competent quarterback, that team is going to rock it. It's going to be so good. Defense needs some help. AJ Terrell is good. Grady Jarrett is good. The rest is to be determined. But
that division is still up in the air. Like the Bucs are in first place, but not for like any real good reason.
Right. Yeah. It's like by default. And like, Tom Brady's advantage from witchcraft can only get him so far, but that doesn't mean he wasn't a good quarterback coming in. Right. So he still has some elements of whatever that was. And that's enough to be better than Baker Mayfield and Andy Dalton without any receivers and a bunch of receivers without any quarterback in Atlanta. Right. Like that division is wide open and it is ugly.
As opposed to the NFC North, where it turns out that even when the Vikings don't play, they end up winning. It's an odd concept, but man,
hey.
You mess with the witches, this is what you get.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so, we've talked a lot about that. So the Vikings have like the 538 projection for the Vikings. They're the most likely team in the NFL, according to the ELO projections from 538, to win their division, which is what's funny is that they are not the most likely team in the NFL to make the playoffs. Like basically a 538 is guaranteed that the Chiefs and the Bills will get a wild card if they don't win their division, which fair enough. If the Vikings don't win their division, I'm not optimistic about their chances of getting a wild card. So it's the kind of those two branching scenarios coming together. But yeah, the 538 is interesting in that they don't know about the level of play in an individual game, right? They just know who won or lost. They might know the score differential using their ELO system. And they know how a quarterback performs when he's in the game versus when he's not in the game. And that's all the information they have. And so they don't know that the Giants are supposed to be unsustainable or that the Vikings are supposed to be unsustainable. Talked about that last episode. If you want to hear me rant about the Vikings and sustainability, listen to that episode. But the thing I want to talk about is there a way for the Vikings to get a little bit better? We're approaching the trade deadline. So I'm going to link a piece in the show notes from my colleague at Pro Football Network, Dallas Robinson, about, this one has one trade candidate from any NFL team. You can read that. But I wanted to pick out a couple of players and talk about whether or not they make sense for the Vikings. Maybe they can become sustainable and they can, pocket those wins when they weren't supposed to get them and get some wins that they are supposed to get later on down the road with maybe some good trades. There's some names that stick out. There was a bunch of people in Vikings Twitter, me included, that were huge fans of Denzel Mims. Fantastic. He might be on the trade block. I don't know, right? Because he's been part of a trade discussion for the Jets for about a year and a half now, and obviously they still haven't traded him. People have been disappointed in New York about his performance, but he might have something there. But the three players that seem like they could be good fits: Josh Jones, Arizona, a player that I'm willing to admit that I was wrong from. He was a guard from Houston that had great athletic testing and great pass protection and run blocking numbers, but obviously in college, how you perform does not translate in the NFL. There's so many other things like, what context did you perform it in? Is it an offense that gave you a little bit of an advantage here or there? Is it the technique that you're using won't translate in the NFL? Is it because you had some kind of advantage in college that you won't have in the NFL, like age? Or if you're only winning by athletics. So there's a bunch of things, right? But I really liked his analytical profile. He is on the outs in Arizona, so he's a potential trade candidate, and he might be better than Ed Ingram, right? Which is not to say that the Vikings should cut bait with Ed Ingram, but they need an immediate upgrade along the interior, and maybe Ingram is the long-term upgrade, but maybe Josh Jones could be a short-term upgrade. I don't know. Also interesting, Isaiah Wynn from the Patriots. He switched from left tackle to right tackle, and he has struggled a lot there. Patriots fans are pretty annoyed with this level of performance, and it sounds like he's on the trade block. He's somebody that when he was coming out of college, a lot of people projected to play guard because of his arm length, and he ended up playing tackle. I thought that his feet were really good, which is why he'd be a pretty good tackle, but hey, he could be a guard. Again, somebody that might not replace Ed Ingram long-term, but maybe does so short-term to prevent that interior pressure from bothering Cousins. So those are two offensive linemen. Offensive line trades to start are pretty rare in the NFL because of the importance of chemistry. But there's other positions that they could target, right? Like they've got injury concerns with Andrew Booth. They've got depth concerns overall at cornerback. And so Sidney Jones from the Seahawks, he's been supplanted by Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant, two rookies that have been playing really, really good football there. Maybe he deserves a shot to be a really good depth player somewhere else, or to be even a potential competitor for the starting job, maybe even next year. So that's somebody that they could grab. There's a ton of edge candidates on that list. So Bradley Chubb, Robert Quinn, Brian Burns, Marcus Davenport, Ben Benogu, Cleveland Farrell. I don't know if that makes sense for the Vikings because it's like, well, okay, you trade for an edge rusher. In some of these instances, it's like a star like Chubb or Burns, or a really, really great player like Quinn, or a player that you feel like you can get a lot out of Davenport, or developmental players like Benogu and maybe Cleveland Farrell, depending on what you felt about him coming out of the draft. How would you play them? What circumstance would you put them in? Are you concerned about Danielle Hunter's production, so you're going to put Bradley Chubb in? That feels weird. Or is Bradley Chubb going to be your long-term star after you get rid of Zadarius Smith? Is that something that you're comfortable doing? Can you commit that kind of money? I don't think you could get Chubb or Burns, right, who are both going to be players that command multiple first-round picks, or a first and a second, or something along those lines. Robert Quinn is super interesting to me because he's one of the best complementary edge rushers in the NFL. And so having him there, rotating as part of a three-person edge rusher unit, and not having to rely on DJ Warner or Patrick Jones, both of whom are playing a little bit better than I expected this year. So not a huge slight to them. I think you could probably get a lot out of that. Ultimately, I think that none of these edge candidates make a ton of sense, but if the Vikings did it, I wouldn't be upset. I would understand so long as I understood what the trade value was. But the act of acquiring those players could make sense. It's not something I would do. And then I think one last thing to consider is tight end. Right. Again, the Vikings have the lowest amount of cap space in the league right now, but if you work around it, you work around it. So that, again, all of these trade kind of discussions for the Vikings need to take that into account. But there's three tight ends that are potentially on the trade block. Now, Austin Hooper just had a pretty good game, so maybe he's not. But Albert Okwuegbunam over with the Denver Broncos is being pushed out. He's getting fewer and fewer snaps every week. We just saw another great game from third-round rookie Greg Dulcich. And so, he's a super athlete that has a stronger history of production than Irv Smith. Maybe you bring him in as a long-term answer. Or Ross Dwelley has been playing all right, but it sounds like he's on the outs, right? It's just a crowded tight end room over there. The Vikings have the opposite of a crowded tight end room, so they could bring a tight end. I think out of all of these players, the most plug-and-play type person is probably going to be a tight end, and so I really like the idea of bringing Albert Okwuegbunam over. But you could, justify a Sidney Jones trade or Isaiah Wynn trade or something along those lines. But I don't think the Vikings will make a trade because of that cap space issue, but it should always be a question that's kind of in their heads about kind of how they could make a move to help improve the team. And I think that some of these would be pretty good.
Well, let's go into some mailbag stuff. And again, we're in the bye week. There's not a lot of serious Vikings questions to really answer, so we get to start off with, well, actually, just a warning. This is pretty much all going to be off-topic stuff in case you are curious. So let's go over to Tank B, who asks the following question: who is the more powerful wizard, Aleister Crowley or Kevin O'Connell?
So if you're not familiar with Aleister Crowley, he's kind of like the most famous occult magician to come out of the UK. Kind of like started his own cults and stuff like that, and learned from the Bhagavad Gita and extracted deep magics from pagan religions all over the world. And a lot of the Victorian Gothic aesthetic around the occult is due to Aleister Crowley. Kevin O'Connell is doing a pretty good job, but we already talked about his misfires. Sorry, I mean from a magician perspective. Let's be clear. We already talked about his magical misfires on the previous episode, where he kind of mistimed the Cooper Rush ascendancy, right? Like Dak Prescott got injured too early, and now the Vikings are going to be playing against Dak Prescott. He kind of screwed that up a little bit, right? When with Washington, like Taylor Heineke might just be a better quarterback, right? And so when the Vikings play Washington, they might actually be playing a better quarterback. So there are a couple of misfires here, right? Like obviously he did a pretty good job manipulating the schedule so that the Vikings got Week 1 Rodgers. That worked out really well for them. But there's just a couple of things here and there where it felt like, hey man, you're in an uncomfortable situation. London, it felt like you had invested so much into making sure that the Saints wouldn't have healthy players, and it just became a difficult game, and it shouldn't have been. So I think that he's still kind of adapting to kind of the things that he can and cannot do with Magic. And so I think you wouldn't want to put him on the same plane as Aleister Crowley, honestly. I mean, it's maybe he's on that path, maybe that's his trajectory, but that would be like comparing like Danielle Hunter to like Von Miller, right? It's like, yeah, you could see the trajectory. It's there, but like they're not the same.
No, Ozzy Osbourne isn't going to be singing about Kevin O'Connell anytime soon, probably.
Yeah, exactly. Well, probably, yeah.
Yeah, probably. E.T. Spaceman asks, for a Reef's Cooking Corner, is there any reason to make a taco that isn't a birria taco?
Okay, so birria taco is like the best taco. I love being able to dip it into the consomme. It is just an incredible invention, but sometimes you're not in the mood for something quite as savory. It is difficult to get bright flavors out of that, and so if you're looking for something kind of fresh, maybe with a little bit of crunch, you maybe want like a fresca taco, right? One that's a little bit more fresh. Maybe you want a fish taco, right? Like I think you can have moods where you don't want that kind of taco, but most of the time, if you want a taco, it'll be better if it's a birria taco, right? Like it's just like that's just what it is. But there are instances where it's just like, yeah, I kind of want to taste, the onions, right? I want them to be bright, and I want them to be raw, and I want them to be, feel fresh, right? And so you want like a Baja style taco, right? And I get that. So I think that like there's a 10% of situation scenario where you don't want to bury a taco, but certainly the other 90% of the time, you'll be much better dipping it off into like this, dipping your taco into like this phenomenal beef soup broth that's just the beef has been cooking in for hours.
If I may paraphrase Bomani Jones for a moment, why do tacos, tacos should be bringing us together. Instead, they continue to tear us apart. Like there's a time and a place for it. You guys can manage. Room Temp 6643 asks, why is Rugrats in Paris about a Japan-themed theme park?
Okay. This is probably one of the best questions we've ever been asked on the show.
Yes. I've gone on record saying this may be the most important one we've ever been asked.
Yeah. So, for people unfamiliar, Rugrats is a Nickelodeon cartoon franchise starring a number of babies. The babies get up to wacky adventures. Very often, those wacky adventures parallel actual historical events, but like with babies. So, I don't know how else to put it. There's a Passover episode where instead of the Maccabees.
I was about to mention the Passover episode and the phrase, let my babies go.
Yeah, let my babies go. The Maccabees are called the Maccababies. They're recreating the story of Passover, but also at the same time, just like hanging out. And so like they intercut between the historical character insert Rugrats and like where they are in reality. Or like there's a Grand Canyon episode, but they're like at a tire store. Like it's phenomenal growing up. Controversially, they added a new baby to the crew in the year 2000, where they went to. So apparently, according to Wikipedia, it was after the 7th season. The show has legs. So they go to Paris and they go to a Japanese theme. Okay, I'm going to read the Wikipedia plot. If that's, I think we're good there. So Lou Pickles marries his new wife, Lulu. Lou Pickles is the grandfather, and that makes Chucky Finster sad because he doesn't have a mother. The following night, Tommy Pickles' father, Stu Pickles, who's an inventor, is summoned to Euro Reptar Land, a Japanese amusement park in Paris, to fix a malfunctioning Reptar robot he's designed for the park's stage show. Now, Reptar is their universe's Godzilla and also the most popular IP on the planet. So it's like a combination of Godzilla and, I don't know, Pokemon. Right? So the entire Pickle family, which includes cousin Angela, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Who's like the bully or whatever. Finster and the DeVille families travel to. So DeVille have the DeVille family has a set of twins, Phil and Lil.
Yes.
Yeah, incredible. Travel to Euro Reptar Land, where Angelica overhears a video phone conversation between the park's head, the ill-tempered and child-hating Coco LaBouche, and Mr. Yamaguchi, the president of the Reptar Corporation. Coco wants to be the next president, but when Yamaguchi tells her his successor must love children, she lies and tells him she is engaged to a man with a child. Angelica is then discovered and saves herself by telling Coco about Chaz and how he is considering remarrying. Deeply evil stuff from Angelica.
It's impressive.
Coco begins pursuing Chaz with the help of her put-upon but kind-hearted assistant, Kira Watanabe. Kira tells the babies of the origin of Reptar, a feared monster whose gentle side was revealed by a princess. Hearing this, Chucky decides he wants the park's animatronic princess to be his mother. That actually tracks. Fair enough. While spending the day in the park with Chaz and Coco, Chucky, the babies, and Kira's daughter Kimmy try and fail to reach the princess. Meanwhile, Pickles' dog Spike gets lost in the streets of Paris in pursuit of a stray poodle named Fifi. Sure. While Coco wins over Chaz, Chucky remains deeply distrustful of her. At the Reptar show's premiere, Angelica informs Coco of Chucky's wish to have the princess for his mother, prompting Coco to infiltrate the show disguised as the princess. Really just evil players in this game right now. She lures Chucky into her arms, where he is horrified to discover her true identity. However, seeing his son embrace Coco convinces Chaz he should marry Coco straight away. On the day of the wedding, Coco orders her accomplice Jean-Claude to keep the babies and Angelica from intervening. She knows. Kira learns of Coco's plot and threatens to tell Chaz, but is thrown onto the street and hurries to the church on her own. Jean-Claude locks the children in the warehouse where the show's robots are kept, where Chucky begins to despair of his dad marrying a woman who doesn't like him. Angelica, in a rare display of guilt, reveals Coco's plans and her part in it and apologizes to Chucky. Now knowing the truth, Chucky rallies the others to stop the wedding. This, by the way, is a big moment for Chucky. He is the coward. The leader of the group is typically Tommy Pickles. So just people who don't have the context of the show. This is a big moment. So they hurry to Notre Dame in the Reptar robot, picking up Kimmy along the way. Jean-Claude follows, piloting Reptar's nemesis, Robo-Snail, but is defeated when Reptar knocks him into the Seine River. The babies arrive in time to interrupt the wedding, Chucky bursting in, screaming his first word, no. Jean-Claude, oh yeah, by the way, the babies talk to each other, but not to like the adults. It's one of those shows. Jean-Claude follows, unintentionally revealing Coco's true nature, and Chaz calls off the wedding in disgust. Mr. Yamaguchi is in attendance, fires Coco after Angelica informs him about Coco's plans. Angelica can talk to adults, by the way. After Coco is prevented from storming off by the babies, she knocks them down. Angelica retaliates by stepping on Coco's wedding train, ripping her dress and exposing her underwear to everyone. Humiliated, Coco flees the theater while Spike chases Jean-Claude away. Spike the dog who was chasing the poodle earlier. As Chaz apologizes to Chucky for everything Coco put them both through, Kira arrives, returns Chucky's teddy bear, which Coco had taken, and apologizes for not speaking up sooner. She and Chaz realize they have very much in common, return to the States, marry, making Kimmy and Chucky step-siblings. And that was the controversial part. It brought Kimmy into the Rugrats group, and people who had watched 7 seasons of Rugrats were perfectly fine with the baby group that they had already had, the characters that they had known and loved, and a dynamic that worked really well. What happens when you throw a new baby into the mix? That's screwed up. That's all I'm saying. I also had the same thoughts about Dill Pickle, also a new baby that was introduced to the group. Hated Dill Pickle. Anyway, it seems like the reason...
Sorry, I'm reminded of that scene in Spaceballs where they like do a recap and they go, all right, everybody got that? Go on.
Anyway, it seems like the reason that they wanted to have a European trip, right? But they also did not want to betray the homage, right? The creative arc of Reptar, which is a Godzilla property, essentially, right? And so they wanted to have both Reptar play a big role, because in the cartoon, Reptar plays an enormous role. You can't avoid that. It'd be weird if they went to a theme park that didn't have Reptar in it, right? They wanted to go to Paris and have that whole thing. They wanted to have a French villain, Coco LaBouche, right? And they also wanted to have, the Japanese history of Reptar. Plus, I mean, if we're being honest, it was like a diversity play, right? Like that's like they introduced an Asian baby. Like, let's just put it out there that happened. This is not the first baby of color that's been introduced to the group. I don't believe she was in the movie, but there is a black baby that's about the age of Angelica. So I guess maybe not a baby, that operates as like a deuteragonist that resists Angelica's antagonism towards Tommy Pickles and the group. So there's that as well. But yeah, I mean, I think that was probably one of the reasons, if we're being completely honest. Let me see if I can get the name of that other person.
Yeah,
do you know it off the top of your head?
Well, my point was going to be that, and you know, this was released pre 9/11, so it was really in vogue in like 2002 to make fun of the French, and this was being done way before that.
Yeah. So that's a big. It's like having that French villain, Susie Carmichael. That's it. That's what I was thinking of. But yeah, it was really in vogue to just make fun of the French, surrender monkey type jokes.
Renaming French fries freedom fries in the capital and all of that crap.
Yeah. Well, that was after 9/11.
Well, that's what I'm meaning, is that it was in vogue to do that after 9/11. This was released pre. So
okay, yeah. So you would, it would make a little bit more sense, yeah.
Just so the point of the question, however, why was there a Japan themed really theme park in Paris?
Because they wanted the Rugrats to go to Europe, but they couldn't ignore the Japanese heritage of the Reptar franchise. So they just decided to combine the two. They're like, why would they go to Paris in a way that is fun for the babies? Reptar theme park. Oh, that's kind of weird. Reptar is not a European property. Let's think about this. So that's probably a pretty decent in-story reason. And then the out-of-story reason is to add to baby diversity.
I have an interesting theory I would like to present.
I'm concerned, but go on.
Are you familiar with the term Paris syndrome?
No.
So what Paris syndrome is, it's something that is experienced by people who visit Paris who have this extreme disappointment when they go to Paris because it doesn't live up to their expectations. It's not what they think is supposed to be. But it's like you have this, you spend your life thinking, oh, I'm going to go to Paris. I'm going to go to Paris. It'll be beautiful. It'll be this. It'll be that. They show up and it's nothing like it. Which isn't to say that Paris is some trash city. What I'm saying is that this is something that is a documented mental state that people go into. And what is found is that this seems to happen more to Japanese tourists than any other tourists that visit Paris. That visit
France.
That's
interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
So
sure,
it's entirely possible that in some backwoods way, some backwards way even, like that this was being done in order to make people maybe feel more like home, like just like giving them this is the Japan themed theme park.
So as sort of a lifeline,
security
to
blanket
tourists.
of sorts,
okay, yeah, definitely they were considering that when they wrote the movie for sure.
Of all, it's one of the stranger things, but if you go down a rabbit hole and look up the Paris syndrome, it's a real thing that people go through.
I mean, I can believe it. It's one of those things where you like describe it, and it's either like really apocryphal and it's based off of fake studies that get reported in like email forwards, or it's like real and it's very funny, and that strikes me as real and very funny.
It's of all dumb things, but that's what we got. So so what we're gonna do is we have one more question here, and then I've got some extra questions that we did last episode. It was about to run long, so I cut the mailbag, and so we're just gonna tack that on to the end of here. So but again, this is all off topic stuff because it's the bye week. That's what we've got. We're gonna go to Alex to end this one. Alex, for James's fugitive co-host corner, if Arif were to flee the law and go on the run, what crime is it for, and where does he hide? How long would it take for Arif to prove that Luke Braun had set him up?
I did a highly theoretical discussion, but it is your corner, James.
Boy, if Arif were to free the law and go on the run, what would it be for? You know, my first thought would be repeated violations of DMCA notices for putting copyrighted material up on Twitter and vis-a-vis rebroadcasting without consent of the National Football League.
Without the express written consent of the National Football League and its broadcast partners.
And its broadcast partners and associates, yes. So that's we may have seen that ad a few times, as it turns out. Where does he hide? You know, Arif.
It's up to you.
I think this would be the sort of thing that I think you'd want to surprise people. I think you'd go and visit your family. I think you would go down to. I think you'd go visit your dad.
That would be very surprising.
Yes, I think that's where you go. How long would it take for you to prove that Luke Braun set you up? Boy. See, that's the thing, is that Luke just has one of those faces that it would be easy to like apply to a mask.
Yeah.
Someone should go as Luke Braun for Halloween.
I strongly agree.
I feel like if he didn't do it, it would be easy to frame him and show that he was the one who was actually doing it. I can't imagine that would take more than 2 weeks.
Yeah, that would be a fairly short,
especially with a bye week.
Yeah. If you're freed up to do that sort of thing, maybe as a product of a bye week for the team that you cover, it would take maybe about 2 weeks, possibly. I mean, the good thing is, right, in this hypothetical scenario, if you were to do this, the advantage here, again, we would never advocate this, is that no one trusts Luke Braun, especially as soon as they see his Weasley little face. And so were he to protest his innocence, it would make him dig a hole even deeper for himself.
It's true. It's science.
Yeah.
That's why he's got rabbits.
Yes. So that at least something has beadier eyes than him.
If you were wondering where the line was, Arif, I want to congratulate you. You found it. Say hi to your mom for me. All right, so we are going to wrap this up. We got a couple of questions from last episode we're going to put in here. So let's go to Mateus. Mateus? Sure. Considering the current pace of the Packers, how many Super Bowls do you guys see being handed out this year? Is there a chance that all those teams face off in another tournament, the Super Bowl? You know, when I first read the question, my thought was, well, that doesn't make any sense because right now the Super Bowl champions are the Eagles because they took the title from Minnesota. But I get it. How many teams are going to beat the Packers this year? Okay, a lot more than would have been expected in Week 1.
Yeah, but the problem is, it is the Vikings Super Bowl for beating the Packers, right? I think most teams don't get a Super Bowl for beating the Packers. Now, obviously, the Vikings lose it the next time they lose, but they would need to beat the Packers again, which I think would be at Lambeau, but I think they'd be favored at this point. Beat the Packers again, and then lose, which there's just not that many games left in the season after that, right? Because the Vikings obviously, but the Vikings play the Packers pretty late, right? So let's take a look at the Vikings schedule. Week 17? Yeah, it's week 17, January 1st. And then they play the Bears. Let's assume they beat the Bears. So they'll actually lose that Super Bowl to a playoff team. It could be the Eagles again. The Eagles could have 2 Super Bowls as they enter the Super Bowl.
Like one of those boxers who goes to the ring with like multiple belts.
Yeah, exactly. And the belts might not even be up for contention. So I think actually in this case, it is possible that we'll get a merging of the Super Bowls, which is a pretty rare event. I think it's kind of like, one of those like lunar events where you have to like every 17 years, you got to set up to watch it.
Yeah, it's something you'll tell your grandkids about for sure. Luke Braun asks, for a Reef's Witchcraft Corner, is it just a Halloween thing this week? Is there any supernatural potential in Julie Cousins? And if so, can we tap into it?
If there is, it would be sinful, so no.
Yeah. Tank B asks, for a Reef's Esoteric Occultism Corner. There are 2 prolific quarterbacks who formerly enjoyed the protections and benefits of witchcraft who seem to no longer be. While Tom Brady will be unable to regain favor in the community, barring some possible outlaw covens, Aaron Rodgers could potentially still regain their favor. While a visit to a local Green Bay coven will likely be helpful to regain his former level of power, Rodgers will most likely have to appeal to powers beyond the mortal realm. On his next spiritual journey, who would be the best deity for Rodgers to appeal to for help?
So I think Rodgers here needs to do a complete 180, right? Because right now, the tattoo that he has is of a lion, right? And so, one would think of historical gods represented by lions, like Mihos or Mysis, a Greek/Egyptian god of war. So I think in ancient Egyptian it was Maius, but the Greeks, had their own names, whose name means he who is true beside her. So the son of the creator god, as well as the feline goddess. I think that is probably something that, one would associate with Aaron Rodgers, right? Because of the importance of the lion of his tattoo. But I think that that's not working for him. I think he needs to go in another direction. I think Rodgers needs to kind of embrace his like villain of the NFL, free thinker. You can't put me in a cage. I've got like my own, political viewpoint. I've got my own intellectual viewpoint. I think a lot. And if you have a reaction to this that says more about you than it does about me, one of those annoying people. And I think worshiping Baphomet the goat-headed devil, right? Would be appropriate, right? Because you've got like the whole, it's like the whole Knights Templar sort of thing, kind of an occultic tradition, but it could really like dig into kind of the misunderstanding Rogers craves. Like he craves to be misunderstood, so he can like feel that he's more, right? Because you can just say, hey, people associate this with being demonic, but really it's about balance and equilibrium, right? It's about good and evil, male and female, human and animal, right? It's to symbolize balance, social order, right? But you all have this instinctive reaction. I want you to question that. I want you to think about why you do this. So I think it would fit, but also would be able to tap into all of the kind of occult energy that he just isn't tapping into with Blue of Earth, right? Like it's just that spiritual path is not working for him. And so he needs to embrace the traditionally associated with Satanism, but not originally, which seems right up his alley, God of Baphomet.
All right. Why the hell not? Nathan S. asks, after being noted by the observational genius of Mina Kimes and the analytical genius of Bill Barnwell, with many other lesser members of the public, is it time for Arif's friends to step up and confront him about his Seahawks fanhood? It seems like his lack of embracing this fandom is unhealthy and is holding him back in embracing the wholeness of his football life.
I was never a Seahawks fan. It didn't happen. And my complaining about that has led to other people thinking it's a funny. It's not that Mina Kimes observed me geniusly and decided that I was a Seahawks. It's not like Bill Barnwell ran a spreadsheet and figured out I was like, that's not what happened. They just see me complaining about being a Seahawks fan, which I'm not, but the assignation that I am, and they pile on. It's just people are piling on. You have friends, right? I bet you don't. Well, here's what friends do.
Boy.
They pile on. That's what they do.
We joked on the show prior that Arif was just going to start picking off on listeners. We finally reached that point. Also, does Drop Play Dave have a shop for his cartoons? You'd want to ask him, but as far as I know, he does not. Resigned Scream asks, which is a worse tactic to use during online arguments? Pointing to the team's record as some sort of a statement, or the number of championships the team has won?
I mean, it really obviously depends on the argument. If you are attempting to make this point about which team is better, at least pointing to a team's record says something about the team. Obviously, we had like a huge argument earlier about, how a team's record does not really tell us how they're going to do going forward and all that, whatever, right? But at least a record is a statement of stuff that happened regarding the current team in question, right? It's, it doesn't matter, obviously, for some arguments, like which uniforms are better or which fan bases are better. That's obviously an awful, stupid tactic. But, it is at least, for a lot of contemporary arguments surrounding football, relevant, right? The number of championships a team won is just like kind of always irrelevant, right? Like, we just have to say that like you can't embrace the tradition that comes with, whatever the history of the team that you like is, but like in an argument, like what does that bring you, right? Like if your argument, I guess, is which team has historically been better, which is a very weird argument, I think, to have. I don't think it happens all that often. Yeah, I guess that's relevant. And pointing to a team's current record is not going to matter. But I just feel like that one is a worse one because it has nothing to do with the current state of affairs, right? Like the Steelers are just a bad team right now. Who cares if they've won 6 Super Bowls? Doesn't matter, right? So like I can't think of many arguments where that comes up and you're like, oh, yeah, I could see why you brought that up. So I think it's the second one. Yeah.
Plus, as Vikings fans, we've been told for how many years how many times the Packers have won Super Bowls. Like it's
I do want to bring this out here. So whenever that happens, Packers fans will say the Vikings have won 0 and the Packers have won 13, right? That comes up. I think those are the numbers. But the Packers are counting. So the Packers fans are counting NFL championships and Super Bowls, but they are discounting the Vikings NFL championship. I'm just going to put that out there. The problem, of course, is that when this argument comes up, it looks really pathetic to say, well, actually, by your counting, we have won one. You're still losing, right? Like, just don't engage the argument. Just want to say that it is an inconsistent accounting.
Yeah. Dr. Aaron Matson asks, what was the funniest loss of the weekend? NDSU, Green Bay, or Tampa Bay?
Yes. Also NDSU.
South Dakota State. Number 1 in the FCS. Yeah. Your Jackrabbits now.
My Jackrabbits. Yeah.
Also,
by the way, I'm not giving up on JMU just because they lost to Georgia Southern. I'm a JMU fan through and through. Mm-hmm. They lost one game. It happens. First time in the FBS. They're the first team to go undefeated in the entry in the FBS. They're the quickest team to be ranked in FBS history. Yep. No one can take that away. But it is their first season in the FBS, so they're gonna take some lumps. Props to Georgia Southern.
Also, for James's relationship corner, once Tom Brady has his "I've made a terrible mistake" moment, if he hasn't already, how would you suggest he try to woo Giselle back? Yes, because that's in my wheelhouse.
Hey, it's your corner.
It is my corner. Well, if we're going by things we've seen online recently, I think the best thing he could do would be to convince her to go to a game. Not a game he's playing at, but just come with me to a game. Let's sit down. You've been to a million of these. Let's just sit back and relax. Let me rededicate my life to you. Let me propose to you. Oh no, I don't have a ring anymore. Oh, but I have this ring pop. Will this be enough to convince you that I'm done playing football and that we can rededicate ourselves. We can have a renewal ceremony, but we're gonna do this with a ring pop. I think that's what the situation calls for. This is gonna go terribly for everyone involved.
Yeah, I can't see this going wrong.
No. Let's go to Le Cavassier, who asks, for a Reef's tinfoil hat bankruptcy corner, in honor of everyone's least favorite Alex getting his, what is the official Norse code conspiracy theory? A secret cabal is keeping Bradbury from playing tight end? The Loch Ness Monster is real? Ohio isn't real? Or Don from Ohio is just a crisis actor? You're forgetting the number one. How do you forget about Melissa?
Yeah, that is the conspiracy of the Norse Code podcast.
Yeah, there's not even
for those unfamiliar. A number of years ago at this point, it's quite a few years ago.
I think it's close to 7 now.
Yeah. Avril Lavigne died, was replaced by a body double. The body double's name is Melissa. The evidence for this is overwhelming. I just don't see how this isn't more popular. They include the fact that the style of music has changed. The nose looks different in photos. Incontrovertible stuff like that.
The jawline looks different.
Yeah. Yeah, you cannot alter a jawline. Everyone knows that. So, famously, right? Well known. That is the obvious conspiracy theory that we all believe here at Norse Code. Is the official Norse Code conspiracy theory. Rip Avril, screw you, Melissa.
Yeah. So, next question's from the gaming nerd, who asks, for a Reef's locker room foosball morale boost corner, which player do you think is most likely to play duos at the table with Kirk Cousins? Is Cousins the goalie or center field? And how many trick shots do you think Cousins has in his back pocket? Now, you and I disagree.
Okay. Yeah, we did. Okay, so I actually don't have an answer for goalie or center field. My intuition is to say goalie, but I don't think that he has trick shots in his back pocket. I imagine that James disagrees with that because it'd be a very kind of a frat move to have trick shots. You're really practiced at foosball. You develop some trick shots. You bring them out at parties. It's just like a thing that you and your frat bros know about at you. I just don't think that he's that kind of person.
So I recently went to my son's Boy Scout meeting. It's on a Sunday. And like a lot of scouts, they meet in a church. Mm-hmm. And in the lower level of the church, they had some games that presumably the kids would be playing, or like teens would be playing before the actual ceremony, or the actual church service, whatever. But they had these out, and the kids for scouts were playing them. And there was a foosball table over there. And so my thought is that Kirk Cousins has done a lot of church lock-ins over the years. I bet he has developed he had to develop a shot. After that many years of church lock-ins, he had to develop something. So I think he's going to play center field, and I think he's got a trick shot.
I just think that, okay, the church lock-ins is a pretty good point, but I just think that a lot of those games are just won by perseverance and not by trick shots. And I think that those are the habits that you build, honestly.
Yeah,
I think the first trick shot he sees bamboozles him.
Nope. I think he sees it and decides he wants to replicate it in order to win the next tournament that happens at the lock-in.
You talk about him like he's Mahomes. No, he plays a very systematic foosball. I'm envisioning
Luke Braun's rating scale.
And trying to freak you up. Yeah.
Yep, I'm trying to envision where he would be on certain days for certain games. So yeah. Don from Ohio asks for Arif and James pet ethics corner.
Oh no.
This is gonna go poorly. After the wife helped rescue the kitten in May, we have found our food bill for our cats to have grown quite a bit. Mm-hmm. One way we have found to save money is to order from a certain website who offers 35 to 40% off your first auto order up to $20 off. I found a loophole where you can get these consistently if you use different email addresses and cancel after the first order. Right now we are up to 19 emails. Should I stop this practice and let the cats starve, or am I playing the system correctly?
Okay. I will not suggest to you that you commit what is actually fraud. Let me just put that is fraud.
Yeah, but you said before it was okay for him to lie to his wife, so I mean, where's the line?
I did not say that.
Yes, you explicitly did. You encouraged it.
No, this is an alternate history based off of alternate facts.
Based on things you said, yes.
No,
let's go with that.
No. Okay, so here is again, I'm not suggesting that anyone commits fraud because I am ethical, but we're one in theory to do this. There are email services out there, which I'm not going to give you, even though that is itself not illegal to say. I just don't want to encourage Don, that allow you to essentially create, quote unquote, multiple emails for the same email address. You don't have to create a new email account every time. You just enter in a new email account each time. It's going to register in the system as a different email, but it goes to the same email account. Just do that instead of setting up 19 different email accounts. That's wild. Not that I have done anything similar. I wouldn't. That's illegal. And I would hate to rob businesses of their hard-earned cash. Everyone knows this about me.
Yeah, you are absolutely against anything of the sort.
Right. And so the question that Don is posing, should I stop this practice and let the cat starve, or am I playing the system correctly? This is quite obviously a false dichotomy. Just buy the cat's food. But if you feel compelled by another force beyond your control, say some sort of warlock or Baphomet controls your actions and requires that you get a discount on pet food, a thing that happens. I would think that maybe not creating a new email every time is the way to do this. I think it's just to put in a new email address every time, but it goes the same. You don't have to spend all the time setting it up.
Wow. I don't know how to handle the situation, so we're going to finish with R. Menson, who asks, for James's geriatric relationships corner, again, this is my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
What are 5 reasons why someone 30 years younger than him would marry Robert Kraft? You can only use money or some synonym of the word money once.
Good luck. On you.
Well, obviously, the first answer is money. That's an absolute given.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suppose I can't say security because I feel like that would come with the money thing.
So close to money.
Boy, it really hurts. The inability to say something other than money really does chop it down. I mean, the ability to travel, not necessarily money, but, the ability to travel and see the world as a result of being
money.
Married and in a relationship with them, not necessarily money.
Money to travel.
Yeah, but it's not a synonym for travel. It's just something that is used in order to get to that point. But
this is already rough.
Yeah, it's not going well.
And
so we're gonna go with with travel, maybe revenge.
Oh, that feels right. I don't know what the scenario is we're posing, but yeah,
I've heard of worse reasons to get married.
Yeah. Against who? Just like the previous relationship?
Yep, maybe it was the previous relationship. Maybe she's doing it as part of as part of like a covert op thing. In order to steal another one of his Super Bowl rings for Vladimir Putin.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, this is good. It's like independent of money.
Yeah.
It's definitely a strong reason that somebody would definitely do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about his looks. That's got to be a reason.
I was literally just going to go, maybe she just thinks he's got a nice personality.
Yeah, see, there you go.
Yeah. That, and he has he has access to an amazing legal team, and maybe this is money related. But he has access to an amazing legal team that has been able to get him out of a lot of real terrible situations and managed to destroy all the evidence.
Yeah, I would say this is like an intersection between unique life experiences that you're investing in and money. Like, it feels like there's a little bit of each at play here.
It's like, money isn't necessarily the reason, but it's not the reason.
Right. It doesn't exist without it.
Well, yes.
But like it's specific to Robert Kraft in a way that is not true of, I don't know, Paul Allen or Rip, but
it's that sort of thing. Yeah. So
yeah,
I think those could be, all those could, love could be part of it, but let's just, It's clearly that she's working for Vladimir Putin in order to steal another ring. Because Putin, the war's not going well. He needs to pick me up. He's decided, let's just go back to the hits, and let's just go back to stealing one of Robert Kraft's rings, which is still one of the funniest stories I've ever heard.
That is amazing. I can't get over that. That happened.
This is my ring now. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
For Arif, my name is James. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So you can find my stuff at Pro Football Network. I discussed some of these things. I talk a little bit more in detail about the Raiders and, the running game and how the passing game has improved pretty substantially. I talk about the Joe Burrow stuff that I had mentioned. I talk about running back contracts and how it relates to the Christian McCaffrey trade, and just some news and notes around the league that I thought were kind of interesting. So that's over at Pro Football Network, and I'm going to have additional pieces coming up soon. But yeah, we had a Christian McCaffrey roundtable that was really fun to contribute to, and we'll just kind of continue to have that content as we approach the trade deadline about kind of these big trades. Like the James Robinson one wasn't as big, so we've got only about 2 pieces on it, not as big. But yeah, check that out. I've got game day stories for, like, for example, the Chiefs 49ers and how I think that it gives us a really good examination of different approaches to how you approach the offseason for a lot of these teams and stuff like that. So check that out over at Pro Football Network.
All right, so that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. For Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that the Vikings are not to be trusted. And we'll be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed, at NorseCodeDN, or my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.